It's the largest cyber attack in history, with more than 150 countries affected. And who's next is anyone's guess. Across the globe, largely in Europe, hospitals have had to send away patients, and millions of data files have been locked away by hackers demanding ransom money to free them. FedEx shipping systems were affected, as were Russia's central bank and railway, among other institutions. The attacks have slowed, but the big question here in the U.S. is, could we be next? To that end, White House officials have been holding emergency meetings and are getting ready for anything.
Overall, the U.S. infection rate has been lower than many parts of the world, but we may still see significant impacts in additional networks as these malware attacks morph and change.
In an increasingly interconnected world, how vulnerable are the systems we rely on every day? Joining me are Chris Wysopal, co-founder and chief technology officer at Veracode. Good to see you again, Chris.
Hey, Jim.
Peter Tran is general manager and senior director for Worldwide Advanced Cyber Defense Practice. Peter, good to meet you. Thanks so much for being here. U.S. largely unaffected, as I said, by the attack. That likely to change?
You know, I actually think the U.S. is better at keeping our systems updated, patched, and better firewall rules.
Why are we better?
I think one reason is we have less pirated software. If you see some of the countries affected, Russia, China, Taiwan, they have a lot of pirated software, so they can't update their software. They don't maintain
So these
systems.
patches they couldn't even use, even if they wanted to use them?
They couldn't even use them. So even businesses over there pirate their software.
So are you as unconcerned as he seems to be about the U.S. or no?
Chris, I'm going to take the other route. I'm really concerned. Mainly because our companies are so global in nature, and we have a lot of trusted partner connections between networks. So a company in the U.S. Could have that fine trusted partner connection, and then all of a sudden the two are interconnected.
Well, let's talk about who. Let's go with your scenario for a minute. Who's it? I mean, the thing that was scariest to me, frankly, is when I heard about the National Health Service in UK. The first thing I thought of, oh my God, the digitization of all of our health records. Is the health system most at risk under your scenario, Peter? What is it in our economy that is most susceptible to this stuff?
So the health system, so we had the warning shot that went around the world last year with Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, if you remember that.
Yeah.
So that is by far, and health systems are changing. It's not static data that they're just after patient records anymore. We're talking about systems where a cardiologist would be sitting in the office and an embedded pacemaker can send telemetry and the data in real time. So that's absolutely at risk. Can you imagine the disruption or even destruction of that data that a physician needs in real time, potentially for a future procedure that they may?
You're not buying that?
No, I agree. Hospitals are sort of a worst-case scenario.
Oh, so other than the hospitals, we're fine.
We're fine. I mean, one of the problems is to keep systems updated, right? A lot of times you have to take them down to patch them. So you can't just use auto-update like you might do at home, which is a good idea. You have to plan for it. You just can't have an MRI machine rebooting like in the middle of the day. You can't have the electronic medical records not available at 1 a.m. on a Saturday morning, right, to the emergency room. So this stuff all has to be planned, and it takes time and energy. That's why hospitals have a big problem.
I want to ask about other industries in a second that affect us, but we as real people, unless we're in these multi-computer networks, I don't have anything to worry about, right? Because the thing that freaked me out the most about this, I was always taught through the newspapers and television and radio, just don't click on the link and you're fine. With this thing, WannaCry or whatever, WannaCry, was that what the name of it was? Yeah.
Yes.
Was that what it was called?
Yeah, yeah.
With, you didn't have to click on anything. It just got into your thing. So
Yep.
am I as an individual at risk, or am I only at risk with 1 degree of separation like Peter was talking about?
You're at risk if you're still running Windows XP, which is,
Which I am.
You
Whoops,
are,
I
really?
shouldn't have said that. Thank you.
I mean, it's a 16-year-old operating system. You should be updated since then. And you're at risk if you don't have auto updates on. Most individuals aren't at risk. The biggest problems for this is old networks from hospitals, manufacturing facilities.
How about banks?
Banks are actually pretty good at security.
You agree with
better.
that?
Well, you know, okay. So let's talk about the next generation of banking. It's here right now. So apps. Everybody has apps, online banking apps, the mobile world. There's mobile ransomware out there that's targeting that. So there's over 260 billion downloaded apps.
I have one on my phone. I actually have 2 on my phone.
I have one too, so I'm fully disclosed.
So wait a second,
now,
that's at risk too?
Well, it's code, right? So code can drop into a mobile device. You know this, Chris.
Sure.
And it it's not just locking up. It's the function of literally just, you cannot function. Apps are codependent on one another. So your mobile life is you as an individual, me as an individual, I have something to worry about.
I want to feel better for a second before I feel bad yet again. This whole notion of how it worked, it encrypts your data, and then something comes up and says, if you don't pay a ransom of whatever it is,
right,
$300 in Bitcoin, $600, whatever it is, we're going to destroy your stuff after X number of days. In light of the fact that virtually nobody paid, from what I read, maybe 60,000 all told dollars, Bitcoin, whatever.
Roughly.
It's small money. What happens to all this data for those who refuse to pay the ransom? Are they in trouble,
well,
or they worked around this?
First of all, the reason that not many people paid is because it was really impossible to pay. They just weren't responsive.
So even if they wanted to?
The group that did this was not ready for such a
So what's going to happen to the
attack.
non-payers?
So if you didn't pay and you don't have a backup, you're not going to be able to get your data back. So this is where a backup of your data is your second best defense.
But if your backup is also infected, or if you use the cloud and that's infected, you're backing up an infection on an infection. So it's this the dog chasing the tail kind of a thing.
So unless you know you're clean to begin with, the backup won't help
so
you, correct?
that's really the key.
I'm into blame laying in almost everything I do that's bad. Let me read you. This is what the president of Microsoft said yesterday, and I'll start in the middle. This vulnerability stolen from the NSA has affected customers around the world. Repeatedly, exploits in the hands of governments have leaked into the public domain, caused widespread damage. An equivalent scenario with conventional weapons would be the U.S. military having some of its Tomahawk missiles stolen, same missiles that were used in Syria recently. And then today, this Tom Bossert is the White House Homeland Security Advisor, who's at the White House press conference. Here he is. Here's what Bossert's response is to that.
This was a vulnerability exploit as one part of a much larger tool that was put together by the culpable parties and not by the U.S. government. So this was not a tool developed by the NSA to hold ransom data.
I'm not an expert. My understanding is the NSA, this was the NSA code. These were the things that were stolen or leaked, whatever it was. And then NSA, because they wanted to exploit this, didn't disclose this for a significant period of time, which is why this problem exploded like it did. Is that not true?
Well, here's the debate. The debate, and I think you and I are going to share this. There is roughly 1.5 billion variants of malicious code in circulation today, roughly. So the likelihood that that code already existed in some form and is shared is pretty high with that degree of. So to say definitively with attribution, it's the shadow brokers or the equation group.
But to say definitively, like Bossert did today, that it's not is equally irresponsible, isn't it? He doesn't know.
You don't know. There's no 100% guarantee that you can get.
And is there not almost a moral obligation on the NSA? The NSA, my understanding is, didn't disclose this as quickly to the public, is because they wanted to use it to exploit other systems that they wanted to surveil, right?
Sure, but you need a lot of pieces of the puzzle to get to where we are. I mean, first, Microsoft had to release a product that had the vulnerability in it.
Understood.
You know, if that didn't happen, we wouldn't even have this. So the root cause is always a software vendor releasing something with a vulnerability in it. But then the second piece is some writing exploits that work really well, like this one, are hard to do. It's not an amateur operation today to write a good exploit for Windows. And the NSA has people that can do that. So the NSA, by writing the exploit code, they created something that would be very hard to do.
Okay, someone sitting at home, whether they have a bank app or whatever it is, in 30 seconds, what should real people do to protect themselves as best as possible from this, Peter?
At home, the user awareness is absolute paramount. So you see something, don't click on it. That's basic table stakes. Make sure your patches are up to date. And Chris said, if you're using an old, you can patch it to its current state. Also, good backups are key. Have it offline if you have to. If you really cherish those photos and your bank tax records, have it on an external hard drive.
How about you? Did you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. One of the things people don't do is they don't have an offline backup. And like Peter was saying, is if your backup gets infected, you're toast. So I keep an online backup and an offline backup, and that way I feel protected.
Do you want to give out your cell numbers to everybody at home? No, I'm only kidding.
Take
Chris,
questions.
Nice to see you.
Thanks a lot.
Good luck,
Thanks
Peter.
for having me.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.